Thank you everyone for joining us. We're excited to have you on our webinar. The topic for today is Agile Requirements Documentation, Tips and Tricks for Modern Teams. Your presenter is Nirav Assar. Nirav is a software engineer here at Object Computing. And in today's program, Nirav will address the concerns around creating effective documentation for your Agile projects, and he will also explore a variety of modern tools that you can use to efficiently manage Agile documentation artifacts. And with that, I hand it over to you, Nirav.
Thank you, Nikki. I appreciate you guys all giving me the time to offer this presentation. I initially came up with this idea just by going through projects in the past. And my most recent project with a client here at OCI, I had to start everything from the ground up. And I thought to myself, you know what? These are tips that I've been using over and over again for the last 8-10 years. Let me put it together. So just a precursor, this is nothing new. This is nothing innovative, out of the box, any type of crazy idea. But it is a conglomerate of a lot of small ideas I've put together over the years working with various teams. And so I initially called this recommendations for Agile documentation. Then we moved to the tips and tricks, right? It's for modern teams. And I just put it together, just kind of a layout of here's what I've done. And I hope it's useful for each one of you. Thank you for attending. So just an introduction. My name is Nirav Assar. I've been a Grails developer since 2009. I'm from the Dallas DFW area, and I worked in various domains, financial, retail, defense, and I joined OCI 2 years ago. And I've done several projects. I'm a hardcore programmer, but I also have a lot of experience in Agile development methodology. So I bring that to the workplace. So I'm a certified Agile consultant, but it's part of my daily routine. And I've worked in several greenfield projects. So a lot of these things come up just from the brand new. And it's like, here's a blank slate. Where do we go from here? And I've kind of taken the problems, illustrated it here, just in bullet points, and then talked about how we evolved. And then I'm trying to offer a template of how to move forward. So, where have I been? I've done waterfall, of course, in the old days when I was at Lockheed Martin. I mean, I think they adopted Agile, but it was old school back then. Then, spiral model, I had brought that up in a couple of the clients. And then we evolved to mini waterfall. Let's do these things the same way, but do it in shorter iterations. And then Agile and iterative development. I think in 2009, Craig Larman came out with a great book, and a lot of people adopted that. Some of my financial institutions, we try to go with that. Extreme programming. I mean, just takes bits and pieces. Scrum. SAFe is a huge Agile kind of enterprise way of doing things. Feature-driven development, BDD, behavior-driven development. These are all just bits and pieces. And I'm sure you guys have heard of many of these terms. And then I just coined this thing, nothing-driven development. Just, hey, what do we follow? And sometimes the folks say, nothing, just do whatever. So I call it NDD, nothing-driven development. All right, so let's continue. So what is this presentation about? So let me illustrate what it's not about, okay? I'm not going to explain Agile or the Scrum values in detail or the practices as a whole, right? I'm not going to be able to define the terms or how sprints work or how to do your job or the roles in an Agile project. This is not Agile training, right? And I'm not going to say, well, this is better than Waterfall because of this, right? We can all go online and check that out. And I'm not going to issue rules. Well, let me turn that back. I'll issue some rules. I'll say, don't do this because of my experience. But it's not set in stone. And it's not about estimating or planning. It's more about illustrating what I've done and what I found successful. So take it as you may, okay? What this is about. This is recommendations that I'm giving on behalf of OCI and teammates that I've worked with and quality developers, quality managers, right? We've worked together and I've found that this works. Doesn't mean it's going to work for you, but I'd always like to take ideas from people that say it's good and at least try it. And it's ideas to organize documentation. And I'm going to give real life examples. I'm not going to make them up. I've taken scraps from various projects and put them together and shown you an example. And to me, it's about being efficient. All right, so what's the need? Why even give this? Well, I found that teams and organizations, they come from different backgrounds and they like to revert to old habits, right? So everybody does this. We've always done it this way. And it's quick and easy for me to do that. It's quick and easy for me to send out an email. I've got this coding snippet. Let me just send out an email and write a bunch of stuff on it, right? That's an old habit. And I found that sometimes you need to break these old habits. And I have here emails and attachments. A lot of times they become the norm. That's the way teams operate. And I don't think that's efficient. And what happens is people have good intentions, right? They find good ideas and they evolve and they adapt for the better. But oftentimes, because of the evolution of it, they never had a plan in the first place. And it evolves and it becomes kind of a mess. We did it the old way. Now we have a new process. Well, where's that one document? Well, we used to do it this way, so go back and look. And then let's attach something to the old way because why copy it? Let's keep it dry. So it evolves. And another need is, we just have inertia. Sometimes an organization just doesn't want to move. They want to get the product out and it's inertia. So the need for me is to say, let's take these ideas, see if we can have a clean slate and start at a better point than we used to. All right, so I've laid out an agenda. Let's go from artifacts. So I'll illustrate some artifacts of Agile documentation. I'll talk about the Agile principles, just so we have those in mind. And so we can say, well, we are following these principles, or at least with good faith. And then I'll outline a kind of a mini documentation framework. Just where do these things stand? Where do you put things? What does it look like? And it's very basic. And then I've got just some tips, some formats I've used for each piece of artifact, each piece of documentation. Okay, so some common artifacts. I'm sure everybody's used to these, right? User stories, epics, daily stand-ups, meeting notes. There's all kinds of stuff that come in a project. Just document things everywhere. And a lot of things are in emails, or they're just in a printed out paper, or they're on a SharePoint, or they're in a document attached to an email, right? A product roadmap, team working agreement, planning session, UI storyboarding, design documents, right? Just, basic meeting notes, design discussions, technical diagrams, things that come out of nowhere, right? And I need a place to put these things, right? It's not I needed a place to put these. And I'm thinking back to 10, 12 years ago, right? When I had a wiki, we would just throw it up on the wiki and be all over the place. Just links, then you kind of group it together. It's kind of like evolution of design of the software, right? Keep it rolling and then refactor, right? So these are things that pop up. And what I've listed here are probably the most important, most reoccurring, okay? There's other stuff, acceptance tests, demos, right? You have a demo and you kind of want a template, a summary, so other people can reference the demo later on. Technical tutorials, right? How to get your IntelliJ set up, or how do you set up the database? How do you deploy something? Where is all this continuous integration? Where's your Jenkins? What's the link? How to set up a new project? These are technical tutorials that are very useful for developers. Where do you put those? Where are they, right? It's a lot of questions that come up, especially for a team that is junior, or they just hired somebody, or they haven't done things earlier. And I would imagine a lot of people on this project, just because you are go-getters, you're attending this webinar because you're either a leader, or you're aspiring to be, or you're trying to get new ideas. So this is not just me giving people advice. It's kind of looking at the landscape. Who's involved? Who's the audience? Another one, retrospectives. Just thought of that. There we go. Okay, so let me just trace back the Agile principles. Okay, so we've got here the manifesto, working software over comprehensive documentation, right? So I'm still going to push, let's keep the software working. Let's focus on the code. We're not here to just write documentation till our eyes roll back in our head, right? We're going to do something that is productive, but documentation is needed, as everybody knows. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation, right? Is it about us working together? You know, it seems kind of frou-frou or ideal, but I think it works, right? Are we going to pinpoint and say, well, you did not deliver this piece of document, therefore the project is halted until you do so? I don't think any of us want to work that way. Sometimes the reality is we have to if we're combative, but most times in a good business environment, we are going in good faith and collaborating together. Customer collaboration, right? Responding to change is the fourth bullet over here in the manifesto, right? So evolve the documentation. Don't just say, well, we had to get this document done, and this is going to take precedence over everything. Agile principles, right? We've got 12 of them. The most notable here, welcoming changing requirements. Happens all the time, right? How do we deal with that? Deliver working software frequently. Don't let it stop your rhythm. Business people and developers must collaborate throughout the project. Now, this really puts together a key point. And as you can imagine, I'm very favorable for a wiki. So these things make it to where anybody can contribute that has a key stake in the project. And simplicity, right? Let's not make it too complicated where people don't want to participate. And reflection, right? Retrospectives. So these are the principles that jump out to me. And that's kind of the ideas behind this framework and these recommendations. Corresponding principles, you know, it's not in the document, but these are domain-driven design aspects and agile things that I hope we all use. Emergent design, meaning we don't design things up front and then hold it and then fall on the sword. We let the design emerge. We come up with something in the beginning, but need to adapt, we do. Emerging requirements, don't try and know everything from the beginning. I don't think you get anywhere doing that. Come up with something initially and evolve. Low ceremony, right? Lighter documentation. Let's not spend all our time. These are all correlating principles. And a good quote here is, you know, we can plan things and they can become useless, but the work of planning is indispensable, right? It prepares you to succeed. Okay, you know, with Agile, I still want to have a plan and I want to plan to succeed.
Nirav, we have a question here, and that is, can you please talk more about how you help your colleagues and other team members welcome changing requirements?
Welcome. It seems like maybe you have an idea of, you know, people or an example of people saying, well, we got to have everything up front. If that's the case, right, it's going to take a while to change that mindset. So welcome changing requirements. Off the bat, it's kind of like you can serve your customer better while doing that. There's got to be a point where you say, well, there's no more. And I think just in a short answer would be, if you design or kind of move your project through iterations, right, or sprints. So let's say you have a 4-week sprint or 2-week sprint. In that time frame, you know, things don't change. We've got to work towards a goal. But at that time, let's bring up different changing requirements. So it becomes intermediary between, you know, 2 extremes. One, let's make progress and let's keep things stable. So that satisfies some people. Then when we want to make changes, maybe that's yourself saying, look, hey, we got to be adaptable. Let's be adaptable at the 2-week mark, at the 4-week mark. Let's start adopting that. So I think that's just a core thing, is that's how you manage different expectations. But other than a personal conversation, that's the best I can give. I hope that's helpful. So just just to get an image out here. Documentation framework, right? I think having a wiki as your central base, you've got a little person here in the bottom. That often you have a document repo where to put your documents, your diagrams, and tickets, right? And without having a kind of a vendor product, I'll give you some recommendations. But this is the framework. You've got your section for your tickets. Could be GitHub, could be Jira, could be Agile, something like that. A wiki could be Confluence, it could be OpenWiki, could be GitHub Wiki, and a document repo. Could be SharePoint, could be Google Docs, could be anything, right? But this is the framework I'm laying out. All right, I mentioned some examples. Jira, I've used extensively, right? I think it's fantastic. Agile, I poked through that around just getting to this presentation, like, hey, what's some of these new ticketing tools? Agile popped up. It looks pretty cool. SprintGround, it's another one. Probably in the last 2 or 3 years, these companies popped up. GitHub, right? Work with that thing every day. It's got everything you need, right? It's an open source. It could be private if you pay. Fantastic ticketing stuff. It integrates everything. Wikis. SlimWiki is a new one that came up. GitHub Wiki, right? That's open source. Confluence, of course, is my favorite. Document repos. A shared drive. You know, I worked at Fidelity, and they just have a shared drive, right? You just dump stuff on there. People just, we would have, you know, gigs and gigs. It can work if you put links to it. I don't think it's the most efficient. Google Drive, SharePoint, Dropbox, right? I'm just relating these boxes to products. All right, now what's the benefit of this? You know, having a wiki integrates things, integrates everything. You can link everything up and put it in context. It fosters collaboration. So anybody can log in, you have an ID. It's got history based on input. It's got kind of newsreels and updates. You know, Jira, Confluence will send out latest activity. It's very searchable. So counter to having a bunch of Word documents in a file folder and that's it, or even putting different file folders. It's very rudimentary search. I mean, do you want to be on Linux and do a grep, or do you want to be on a wiki and just search things and it comes up like Google? You know, these are the benefits I see. It's traceable. So when I mean traceable, meaning which document relates to which ticket, and which ticket relates to code. So you've got, you know, check-ins from commits, you've got tickets that relate, and a document that does it. You can find out exactly what was happening at the time. And you can be as precise as you want. And remember, I value low ceremony, but it's very easy to make everything traceable. In GitHub, you just put in the ticket number, put a link for the document, boom, everything's related. We do that OCI with open source all the time. You can go on and see how these things work. And we trace things from 3 months ago. We have no idea what it was. And we come back and say, well, this is the questions that arose. This is a sample project, and boom, everything's traceable and you can recreate your environment. It should be like that on every project if you want to solve problems. So I think the framework allows that to happen. And a wiki's evolving. You can redesign it anytime. You can put your documents in different areas and relink it. And this last item here is just traceability, binds tickets to stories and documents. Okay, so now kind of a format or a recommendation here. The wiki, it's open to all team members, business folks, developers, project managers, testers, users, management, upper management. They can all see this, and you can have sections for each. And this is kind of how I've done it in the past. I sectioned them off into themes, right? You've got your meeting notes section, project management section, meaning not like contracts and whatnot, but how to manage tickets. And over here, if you see this HDAP, this is a project I did with a company. They just call it HDAP. It's a link to the Jira. And they used to put things in a SharePoint. And so I just put a link into the docs. If you see that on the document section. Then you've got testing. It's more involved here. You've got details for a test server, actual testing plan, which is kind of a tutorial, a template where people can copy, paste, and fill in their own details. Then we've got developer notes, set up Jenkins, how to set up Jenkins, how to run Jenkins, and design discussions. A lot of these things happen on email, and I started moving things to the wiki, and I started requesting folks put it on the wiki. And I was a team lead for this, so I had some authority and sway. But a lot of times, as an example, you could just do it yourself, and hopefully people will follow. And then you can have counter examples. Well, we did it this way, and it was a mess. Trying to do it this way, it seems more organized. And requirements, right? Links to stories. And I had a sample here, which kind of guides people on how to do a user story. And I have, formatting suggestions here. And we'll go to the first one. So user stories. So this is a link in the wiki. And, a kind of a rule of thumb I had was, for our tickets, we don't need to be putting a bunch of text in our tickets and elaborating on the story, because that ticket's going to open, it's going to get worked on, it's going to be in progress, and then we're going to close it. And then when you close it in most ticketing systems, it goes in the archive. You don't want to keep seeing that pop up. However, on the wiki, maybe 2 months down the line when it's in testing, or the user finds a bug, or somebody wants to improve on it, user stories serve as a kind of a, in-process user guide. It's something that evolves. So I want the elaboration to be on the wiki, right? And so the story title, a lot of people say, well, we got to say, as a user, we need to do this for the result of this. That's pretty templated to me. I mean, it's a good way to start, but do I really need to say, as a user, blah, 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 every time? To me, it's just the title. Put the title of the feature, okay? Let's email notification, right? That's your ticket feature here. And the story part is kind of, let's elaborate a little bit on it. Let's talk about, what the feature is about. A couple sentences. And then let's go into notes. We've got more details on this particular ticket. I scratched it out because it's proprietary, but they had states, right? Open, created, in progress, complete, and closed. When do you transition to these states? What the user does. These are more story elaboration, and I recommend we put it in the wiki. Okay. Daily stand-ups, very basic template here, right? The more conventional, accomplished yesterday, goals for today, roadblocks, right? So these are, if you do it by person, everybody comes and says what they do. Put some notes, put it on the wiki, right? Have a scribe, change the scribes every day. And have it on a link on the front page. What we had here, let's say, go back. So over here, meeting notes. So I would have just one page and I put it per day and put what people said. And a lot of times I wouldn't put each person, I would just talk about what's going on, or you could do it Kanban style by ticket, where we talk about the tasks. It's not about the person or what you've done yesterday, what you've done tomorrow, what you've accomplished, blah, blah. It's more about, hey, what is the team working on? And you talk about these things. Another artifact with their recommendations, a working agreement. So, how do we get on the same page? What are our values? And this may relate to the question we had up here from, I believe it was Gary. Come and have a meeting and say, let's talk about our values about this project. What's a working agreement? One of them may be, let's try and accommodate changing requirements, right? And some other ones I've added as an example would be, don't be afraid to ask for help. That's a value here we have at OCI. When I came on, it's, hey, we know you're smart, but don't be too proud. We've got a lot of help here. Keep asking for help. And I get feedback from my manager saying, hey, we're glad you asked for help because you get the work done. I'm like, okay, sounds good. Another one, particular, ask questions in Jira. Stop sending me emails all over the place. Well, how do you do this? How do you? because then I have to forward the email to 5 other people when that comes up, or I have to search for it. Just put it on the damn wiki, okay? Or put it in Jira, and then we'll move it. If it's an elaborate answer, put it in the wiki. We'll put it in the wiki later. But if it's a particular question on a ticket or it's a bug, put it in Jira, put it in the wiki. I go through that initially, transitioning teams. Put it in the wiki. That's basically that. Avoid long technical emails. More, ding dong stuff I came up with. Be on time for meetings. Definition of done. That's something that's very important. What is done? Does that mean I've finished the coding? No, to me it means we've designed it, we've wrote the requirements, we've tested it, we've gone to UAT, and it's out for production. And so at that point, it's done. Commit often and early, meaning don't hold on to your code. And if the build breaks, it's everybody's problem, not just, oh, that person broke it, let's point the finger. And what we do, we would sign it, right? I've had a few success scenarios where everybody agreed on these things, and we put our names on it. Hey, this is what we're gonna do. Kind of your mini Agile manifesto, pretend you're one of those guys. Retrospectives. I talked about these sprint intervals, 4 weeks or 2 weeks, right? I like the 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, the initial 4 or 5 retrospectives are very interesting. They become what we've done wrong, how can we help, how can we improve? I don't like this guy's attitude, or this guy needs to be fired, or let's bring this new guy on, or these documents suck. They become very productive if you're open to it. And document it, right? Talk about it, because you're not going to solve everything in one iteration or one sprint. Talk about the good. What could be done better? Improvements. Personal complaints. This guy's late all the time, or I don't really like our 8 a.m. scrums. It's too early, right? There's nobody here. We're waiting for 10 minutes. And put the action items down. Don't just say, this is a complaint. What are you going to do about it, right? And put that on the wiki. Show your manager, right? Don't keep things secret. Keep it open. Those first 4 or 5, once you start getting the project in smooth, I've had it to where the other retrospectives are, hey, everything's going well, and about 90% of it are repetitive. You stop documenting them, and then it comes to the key problems. Then you start solving problems that are gigantic, right? I remember at my previous client, it was Fidelity. We had a system that we created, and it was working about 80, 90%. And then this always in the elephant in the background was, well, what happens when we try to encounter this new trading platform? How do we integrate with that? And then the retrospective started going into, let's try and integrate it with this vendor platform. And that's where they moved. And it basically just changed everything. So we had a great product that we created, but we're going to integrate with another vendor product. And that was never talked about before, but it was always an elephant in the room. Once we solved a lot of these small problems, we started attacking the bigger problems. Okay. And this is a recommendation for acceptance tests. So if you follow test-driven development or behavior-driven development, that type of philosophy means, in my world, it's Grails, it's Spock, right? So you have given, when, then, right? And then it kind of an ideal way is, oh, let's have the self-documenting test. Yeah, that's good, but I still think if you have a tester, and a lot of these testers, folks, they're not doing the same technology you're doing. They're doing Selenium. They're doing scripting on HTML and a lot of things that aren't Grails, Groovy, or Java stuff. So they need to document their ideas, and you can help them. Or if you're doing it yourself, put it on the wiki. And I did some research about 8, 9 years ago. This testing philosophy. Acceptance criteria is a general way of going about it, a general summary. And then you have test cases. So you have variances, right? Your borderline cases. But the acceptance criteria is just a general idea of what the test is going to be like. And if you look at this example here, create basic info, which is kind of an H-step is a correction plan for a chip on a manufacturing floor. But a basic info criteria would be the user should be able to enter an HTAP and create several pieces of information based on the description. After submitting, it should be displayed back to the screen. I mean, that's not a test case, but it's a criteria for a test case. Then when you actually input the information, you have test cases. And we would number them 1.1, 1.2 variations. And so these things, they're very easy to code. They're very easy to test if you document them short, succinctly, and in an organized fashion. And we would link these to our Jira tickets. And this is not just for this project. I've done it for 5 or 6 projects like this. And you end up getting these documented test cases. And sometimes 6 months from now, you forget if these things were actually tested or not. And you can go back and check and see, it was working at this point. We saw it. And now it's broken. So we found out that something led to that, either a new requirement or new code or, you know, something the user did you never thought of. So that's our recommendation for acceptance tests. And then you've got plenty of other things. I mentioned demos, design documentation, you know, setup docs, technical tutorials. A good way is to just have a title, you know, put a table of contents, have something called a summary or an introduction, and then, you know, just here on the left side, summary, details, diagrams, section them off into different consumable, you know, formatted ways to where, you know, you don't want to have these things on the wiki be blog-like and look like you know, an online news archive, right? Where you're just asking questions of people replying. That's good for discussion, but if you want to have something like a tutorial or a design doc, that should be easily referenceable later on so team members can catch on, or you can just catch up yourself. So I found that helpful. You know, two offerings, summary, details, and diagrams, or purpose, problem, details, actions. And this goes for almost everything. Another interesting thing to come on is, you know, when you start looking at UIs, storyboarding. This is an example of, we talked a couple times with our team, and we talked about how things are going to interact, and it was, you know, back and forth, and, you know, I just wrote it down. I wrote it down and called it storyboarding. It's kind of free form because I didn't have kind of a summary and action plan. It's just kind of like drawing diagrams, and then you summarize it and write it down. You know, a good way also is to just, if you're doing things on a whiteboard or kind of an online drawing tool, just take a picture and attach it with this kind of verbiage surrounding it. All right. So pet peeve, avoid long technical emails. Why? I'll just give you the facts. Because the email list changes. You know, people can't keep track of replies. It's not sequential. You got one reply and somebody replies and they probably have a previous email. And how are you going to follow the zigzag on a technical problem here? It's difficult. You know, attachments, they're not in context, right? You write a long email and then you say, look at attachment 4 and there's 5 different attachments. You're like, which one relates to this thing? You know, you can't put it in context. On a wiki, you can. You could say, you put a link and it goes directly to the attachment. And it's not sustainable or retrievable. You can't keep this going for a long time before it gets confusing. And then let's say you leave it for a couple weeks. How do you find that thing again? It's in a different folder for everybody, and you got to remember the title. I mean, you got to remember something about it, but in a wiki, you'll be able to find it much easier. And it's not in a central location, so you got multiple copies, right? And so somebody adds something to something, you don't know if that's your copy or not. To me, it's a mess. And I use this fancy word, ephemeral lifetime, meaning emails are okay, right? But you have to remember they're temporary. So if you want to have something that's long-term and useful, migrate it to the wiki. All right, final recommendations. Keep as much information on the wiki as you can. Avoid blog-like entries. If something's valuable in email, let's say you have that. I mean, don't say, I'm ignoring it, this sucks. I'm deleting your email immediately. Export it as a PDF, put it on the wiki, and put some context around it. Maybe start a wiki page and say, this was a discussion that happened on email. I am dumping it in the wiki. You know, be practical about it. So then you've got an email that is useful, but it's now searchable on the wiki. Use a document repo. A lot of companies will have, you know, a repo which formal documents, sometimes contracts, and they require these long Word documents to be done. That's fine. Put it in the repo and put a link from it from the wiki. Also, you can, on Confluence and I think other wikis, you can format your page as a Word document with titles and outlines, and then you can just export it into a PDF. And I've used that to where then you dump it into the repo. Edit all team members to contribute, you know, make it collaborative. And the good thing about it is you can refactor when necessary. So if your wiki's looking kind of dumpy and disorganized, I've actually created tasks in Jira for a project, refactor this messy wiki. It looks terrible. And I'd spent 3 hours doing it, and we come back, and that refactoring would give me benefits for the next 2 months. Then it becomes a little bit shaggy again, trim it again. You know, 2-3 hours gives you benefits for more longer term. So that concludes my presentation.
We'll go ahead and wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining us.
Thank you.